One last one I got for you, Bruno. This comes from Facebook from Debbie Pillay, and she just says, do homeowners still have to pay capital gains, and why?
Sure. Okay. So the why is a funny one. Why do we have to pay any tax? I'm not going to get political, so let's just assume that tax is payable. I'll just explain the history behind the tax, just so there's an understanding of it. The first thing here is a concept of homeowner and the definition of homeowner. This is quite important because a homeowner, the way that we describe it nowadays, could mean a variety of different things. I have various properties that I own and they're homes. And when I go to the bank, they consider me a homeowner, but I'm renting them out. So I'm using them for the purpose of trade. Now, this is very important to remember. I gain a benefit from it. I gain a profit. I don't even need to gain a profit, but the intention is at some point to gain some kind of profit. So I'm running it as a business, as a trade, versus my house where I live and I reside. So that's residential. So these are two very different types of home ownership. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. Now, also bear in mind that capital gains is paid on an asset that you acquire. So it's that the best way to describe it is it's the tree that bears the fruit. The tree is the capital asset, and the fruit is income that you gain from the capital asset. So you normally pay income on the rental that comes in, but provided that you're not flipping these properties or selling them off as a development, it's still going to be considered a capital asset if it's intended to be kept long term, right? Now, why do we charge tax on capital assets? Because remember, there's a level of benefit that you acquire from it. So on an everyday basis, if you perform a service and you receive a certain amount of income, let's say for every 100 Rand, you would land up paying 45 Rand for the service you provide. Why? It's tax, right? That's our tax rates. It's what we agreed to. We're actually not the highest in the world. So every taxpayer has a reason to complain. You pay it because it goes to government or treasury applies it in certain specific ways, right? Let's leave it there. Capital gains is a form of income taxation, but it just works differently. So we don't look at, you did benefit to a certain degree. So you bought the property for R1 million and you sold it for 2 million Rand. Now that difference is taxable. It's just a rule of taxation. It's capital gains. That R1 million is going to be taxed. It's not going to be taxed at the same percentage as your income tax. So there is a level of indulgence to say, look, if it's a capital gain, you've paid your rental income, you've paid tax on your rent, it's fine. So now you'll pay a smaller tax if you do land up selling this capital asset. So you sell the property, there's a price difference of R1 million. Whether it's in your personal name, a company, or a trust, there's different ways of calculating the capital gain. But typically, it would always be lower than what you would pay for income, your normal income tax, right? So do homeowners still pay capital gains? That's never changed. It's a 2001 thing that came into play, and it still applies. It's not a bad tax to pay versus your income tax. So it's obviously, if it's a capital asset, you definitely want to do capital gains. A little trick, and not really relevant to the question, the little trick is, or not trick, sorry, the bad choice of words, but things that people need to bear in mind is certain expenses regarding a capital asset. You can either, if it's based on you deriving income, you can claim it against the income and deduct the income and reduce it, or you can allocate it to the property as an expense, which means that when you bought it for R1 million, but you spent 500,000 Rand building another room, right? That's an actual capital expenditure. So you wouldn't deduct it against income, you would actually add it to the property value, and the difference between what you bought it for, what you sold it for would be reduced. So just bear that in mind. Always keep records, because when you sell this property and you've got capital gains to pay and you've held it for 20 years, and SARS now goes, but it's R1 million, you're like, yeah, but I built this whole thing. SARS is going to come asking, okay, but how much did it cost? And 20 years later, now you don't have invoices. It becomes very difficult to prove that you spent half a bar, for example, building a room.
Yeah.
The only exception to this is homeowners in properties within which they reside. That's different. So there you don't pay capital gains up to 2 million rand because it's your residence. So you live in it 100%, you can sell it, you don't pay capital gains on it. So you don't need to worry about that. That's perfectly fine. So that is excluded. Just remember again, allocation. If you live in it, but you have a little cottage at the back where somebody's renting out, then you're not living in it 100%. So that cottage is still 5%. You live 95%. You only get that exclusion for 95%, not the 5% there you'd have to pay. But long story short, yes. Why? Because we have to.
I like that answer. All right. And I think that's us for the day, Bruno.
Oh, thanks so much, Nick.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too.